On the morning of 31 December 1983, Nigerians awoke to learn that the Second Republic of President Shehu Shagari had been replaced during the preceding night by a new federal military government, the fourth since independence. The leader of the coup d'etat was Major General Muhammadu Buhari, the outgoing current president of Nigeria. The military had become impatient with the civilian government of President Shagari. The Nigerian economy was in shambles, and the true cost of the failure to use earlier revenues from oil and foreign reserves to good effect had now become apparent. Corruption in particular was out of control, and the fraudulent re-election of President Shagari had been too obvious. Because Shehu Shagari's government could not control the situation, the military would try its hand, and this is why General Buhari took over. In this episode of African Biographics, we cover the story of Nigeria's New Year's Eve coup of 1983 as well as its aftermath. Lieutenant Olusegun Obasanjo had succeeded as Nigeria's military head of state after the assassination of General Murtala Muhammad in the abortive coup attempt of February 1976. General Obasanjo promised to return Nigeria to civilian rule in 1979, and much of his three-year period in office was taken up with working out a new constitution. The ban on political activity in Nigeria was lifted in September of 1978, and within 2 months 50 political parties had emerged. However, only 5 parties were accepted as fully national parties, and these were the Yoruba-based Unity Party of Nigeria (UPN), led by Chief Awolowo; the National Party of Nigeria (NPN), based in the north, with Shehu Shagari as its presidential candidate; the People's Redemption Party, the PRP, also northern-based and led by Aminu Kano. The other 2 parties, the Nigerian People's Party, the NPP, led by Nnamdi Azikiwe, and the Greater Nigerian People's Party, the GNPP, led by Waziri Ibrahim, had begun as a single party and then split. These 5 parties contested the elections, which were complex since 5 separate elections, namely local, state governors, legislature, and presidential, had to be fought simultaneously. In the presidential elections, Shehu Shagari won the most votes with 25% of the votes in 12 states but not in 13, and this led to an immediate challenge that he had not won 2/3 of the 19 states as stipulated in the constitution. Anyways, Shehu Shagari was sworn in as president of the Second Republic on the 1st of October 1979. Shagari's government faced severe problems throughout his time in power. Firstly, his credibility was always an issue since his electoral win had been rejected by his political opponents. Secondly, on the economic front, Nigeria's overdependence upon oil would lead to a severe economic downturn when the oil price plummeted in 1982. 90% of government revenue came from the oil industry. When the oil boom came to an end, the Nigerian economy plunged into recession. Numerous government projects were abandoned and unemployment soared. State governments became unable to pay teachers and civil servants or to purchase drugs for hospitals. But among the elite, the scramble for enrichment continued. By 1983, the Nigerian economy had virtually collapsed, but still the politicians and contractors continued to bribe, steal, smuggle and speculate, accumulating vast illicit fortunes and displaying them lavishly in stunning disregard for the common man on the street. Subsequent government measures to control imports and limit the export of foreign exchange led to widespread corruption and financial malpractices. As a consequence, Nigeria found itself in massive debt and was forced to turn to the IMF for assistance. Predictably, it was the poor who suffered most from the crisis, and this led to growing resentment against the government. Early in 1983, Shagari's government expelled some 2 million foreign workers, the majority from Ghana, but also from Cameroon, Chad and Niger. It was a panic measure in response to the deteriorating economic situation and did much to undermine Nigeria's standing in West Africa. However, these expulsions did not solve Nigeria's economic problems. The rest of the year 1983 was dominated by the elections that were due to be held over August and September. The NPN party machine achieved a triumph and Shehu Shagari won 47% of the votes that were cast. Unfortunately, these elections were marred by accusations of electoral malpractice and fraud. Shehu Shagari was sworn in for his second term on 1 October 1983, but he was now presiding over a country that was divided rather than united as a result of the elections. The alleged electoral fraud, which returned Shagari to power, coupled with declining prices of oil at the world market, led to a remarkable economic downfall in Nigeria. By the end of the year, the economic situation provided the soldiers with an excuse to intervene, which is what they did on New Year's Eve to return Nigeria once more to military rule. As I alluded to earlier, on the morning of December 31, 1983, Nigerians woke up to learn that the Second Republic had been replaced by a new military regime. It was Brigadier Sani Abacha who delivered this announcement on Lagos radio. Abacha proclaimed that the military's mission was to discharge its national role as promoter and protector of national interest. Abacha also announced the military was doing away with an inept and corrupt leadership that had precipitated the grave economic predicament that Nigeria found itself in. Other reasons given by Sani Abacha included the collapse of the educational system, the high unemployment rate, salary arrears, and impending salary cuts. This was while the Shagari-led government continued to revel in squandermania, corruption, and indiscipline. Initially, the coup appeared to be confined to the capital city. Meanwhile, in most states of the Federation, the military presence was either very muted or ostensibly non-existent. Many state radio stations continued regular programming without as much as mention of the coup. As the day progressed, however, the course became even more evident. 2 afternoon broadcasts that followed announced the voluntary retirement of all the service chiefs. It was requested for the brigade commanders to take charge of their state governments pending the appointment of military governors.
Shagari did try to solve the crisis by expelling 2 million illegal immigrants who had come to Nigeria to find work from neighbouring West African states. He accused them of taking jobs away from Nigerians, and his move to throw them out was popular in Nigeria itself, but widely condemned by the rest of the world. Now, Nigeria's new military rulers have accused Shagari and his government of turning the country into a debtor and beggar nation. Many fear what the military's solution to the crisis will now be.
Shehu Shagari was retired on 31 December 1983 along with many other civilian leaders. He was never considered to have enriched himself and was released from detention in 1986, though he was banned from politics for life. Later in the day, on 31 December 1983, Brigadier Sani Abacha announced on Lagos television that the new head of state would be Major General Muhammadu Buhari. General Muhammadu Buhari, the man who was now in charge, was born on 17 December 1942 in Katsina, Nigeria. Buhari attended the Katsina Model School in 1953 and Katsina Provincial Secondary School between 1956 and 1961. Upon completing his secondary education, he joined the Nigerian Military Training School in Kaduna in 1963 and also attended the Officer Cadet School in Aldershot, United Kingdom in October of 1963. In 1964, Muhammadu Buhari returned to Nigeria for the Platoon Commander's course at the Nigerian Military College. In 1965, Buhari left Nigeria for the United Kingdom, where he attended an Army Mechanical Transport School in Borden. Prior to the 1983 military coup, Buhari came into prominence in Nigeria in 3 different ways. First, he participated in the Nigerian Civil War, where he served as a combatant. Secondly, he served as military governor of the northeastern states of Nigeria in 1975. In 1977, Buhari was appointed minister, then called Federal Commissioner for Petroleum and Natural Resources. In addition, following the establishment of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, Buhari was appointed its first chairman. Some 2.8 billion naira disappeared from the NNPC's accounts under his watch between 1976 and 1979. However, at the time, there was a general consensus, even among his critics, that he remained trustworthy, financially disciplined, and exemplified a career marked by his use of public money to execute public projects. On New Year's Day 1984, Buhari, by now evidently in control, provided a rationale for the coup and a broad framework for public policies under the new military government. The military's main reasons for intervening, he stated, were to arrest economic decline and moral corruption.
Fraud, indiscipline, corruption, squandermania, misuse and abuse of public office for self or group aggrandizement, which had assumed debilitating proportions in the last few years, will be dealt with ruthlessly, no matter whoever may be involved. The private sector has also its share of crimes against the Nigerian economy, especially in the area of the distribution of basic commodities. Reports reaching us confirm large-scale hoarding of commodities. I have already warned that hoarding will not be tolerated. Gentlemen, I must point out that your assignment as military governors is a service posting.
All political institutions were banned or dissolved, and the Supreme Military Council, the SMC, was reinstated. Because of the great powers that his second-in-command, Major General Tunde Idiagbon, Chief of Staff at Supreme Headquarters, was believed to wield, many commentators refer to this government as the Buhari-Idiagbon regime. Initially, this coup appeared to be widely popular in Nigeria. Now, the urgent task before the government was to salvage the country's economy, which had suffered from the mismanagement of the Second Republic and from the rapid drop in the price of oil. Upon taking power, the Buhari government investigated and detained the top political leaders of the Second Republic, holding them responsible for economic excesses of the previous regime. Constraints were placed on various groups, including the Nigerian Medical Association, which was outlawed, and the National Association of Nigerian Students. Buhari's regime also promulgated 2 decrees that restricted freedom of the press and suppressed criticism of the government. For instance, Decree No. 4 forbade any journalist from reporting information considered embarrassing to any government official. 2 journalists, Tunde Thompson and Nduka Irabo, were convicted under the decree. Decree No. 2 gave the Chief of Staff at the Supreme Headquarters the power to detain for up to 6 months without trial anyone considered a security risk. Special military tribunals increasingly replaced courts of law, while the state security agency, the National Security Organization, was given greater powers. General Buhari also launched efforts to deal with what he called the problems of indiscipline in the areas of environmental sanitation, public decorum, corruption, smuggling, and disloyalty to national symbols such as the flag and the anthem. A major hallmark of Muhammadu Buhari and Tunde Idiagbon's military government was its war against indiscipline. The regime diagnosed the problems dogging Nigeria as being essentially underpinned by corruption and indiscipline. Major General Tunde Idiagbon noted that indiscipline was the bane of Nigerian society. He argued that without discipline, Nigeria would degenerate and become a jungle where respect for law and order is disregarded, traditional norms and principles are cast aside, criminal tendencies find fertile ground to flourish, and a sense of insecurity of life and property haunts the citizens. To this end, the government pursued the enforcement of a disciplined culture on Nigerians by launching a war against indiscipline aimed at uprooting every manifestation of degeneracy and dishonorable conduct. This included driving on the wrong side of the roads, littering the streets, parks, and dwelling compounds. Other notable offenses including cheating, taking undue advantage of scarcity to inflate prices for quick monetary gains, working without commitment, and devoting little or no time to the upbringing of Nigerian children. In the war against indiscipline, Nigerians were pressed to behave. They began to queue for buses and other services. The soldiers were ordered to whip people who did not form orderly queues at banks and bus stops. Military officials sometimes arrived at the gates of government offices very early and waited for government workers who arrived late. Tardy civil servants were humiliated and made to kneel down irrespective of their office or positions or age, and were made to do frog jumps as punishment for coming late to work. The civil servants faced corporal punishment, and in some cases they were summarily dismissed. According to some sources, cheating university students faced the possibility of up to 20 years in prison. As a part of the war against indiscipline, the federal government carried out thousands of army raids on warehouses where hoarded goods were stored. When confiscated, the goods were either sold off to the public at low prices or were given away freely. Many of the hoarders, as the government claimed, were top officers in the defunct Shagari civilian government. The other objective of the military regime was to recover the huge sums of money that had been smuggled out of the country. This is what led to the infamous Dikko saga. The biggest scandal to mark Buhari's presidency was the Dikko affair. 2 days after the military coup, Dikko, who had been Minister of Transport and Aviation, fled the country to Britain. He was accused of large-scale corruption, hoarding essential commodities, and enriching himself. Dikko was labeled Nigeria's most wanted man, and a plot was hatched to get both him and the money back. This plan entailed having a team of Nigerians and Israelis attempt to kidnap and repatriate the exiled former minister from London. Reports in the British media and reprinted in the Nigerian press indicated that Umaru Dikko was abducted on 5 July 1984 in the garden of his London home by armed men. They bundled him into a van after a desperate and violent struggle. The extraordinary plan was to kidnap Dikko, drag him, stick him into a specially made crate and put him on a plane back to Nigeria alive. The British police, alerted to the abduction by Umaru's private secretary who had witnessed the struggle, mounted a big rescue attempt which included a close watch on all sea and airports. Customs officials, already alerted by the police, became suspicious of 2 wooden crates reportedly being loaded into a Nigeria Airways cargo aircraft at Stansted Airport and declared as diplomatic baggage. There was also a medical-like strong smell that emanated from one of the crates, and this strong smell assailed the sensitive nostrils of a customs official. With their suspicions fully aroused, the customs officials stopped the loading of the cargo while they made discreet telephone calls to the Home Office and the Prime Minister's office for directions. Thereupon, the departure of the cargo from Stansted was delayed on the orders of Scotland Yard. A British anti-terrorist squad rushed to the airport and found that the 2 wooden crates addressed to the Ministry of External Affairs in Lagos and declared as diplomatic baggage had no diplomatic markings on them as required by the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations and Immunities of 1961. The crates were inspected and inside each of them were found 2 men. In the first one they found an Israeli and a Nigerian diplomat. In the other crate were Umaru Dikko with a tube pushed into his throat, apparently to assist him to breathe during the long flight to Lagos, as well as an Israeli who was a leading anesthetist. This Israeli was in possession of drugs and a syringe. Umaru Dikko was lying on his back in the corner of the crate. He had no shirt on, he had a heart monitor on him, no shoes and socks, and handcuffs around his ankles. The Israeli anesthetist was in there clearly to keep him alive. In the aftermath of this whole fiasco, a Nigerian intelligence officer and the 3 Israelis who were involved in this plot all received prison sentences in the UK. Diplomatic relations between the UK and Nigeria broke down and were only fully restored 2 years later. Although the Buhari Idiaborn regime successfully ordered Nigerians to queue, dance and hop around in the name of discipline, it soon found out that the economy could not be ordered around by force. Nigeria's economy continued to be in dire straits. Negotiations with the IMF had broken down during 1984 and the government then initiated its own austerity program. The austerity measures made it difficult for local industries to procure essential imported raw materials, leading many of them to close or to operate at greatly reduced capacity. Many workers were laid off and the government itself retrenched many workers to increase its cost effectiveness. All of these actions were accompanied by high inflation. The price of basic food items escalated and life became increasingly difficult even for the affluent. Unfortunately, because the economy was in bad shape, the government resorted to bartering its oil. In May of 1985, for a second time, another 700,000 foreigners were treated as scapegoats for the state of the economy and expelled from the country. During the course of 1985, Buhari became notably more authoritarian while failing to come to grips with the country's economic problems. Although 2,500 political detainees were released, the government retained powers of detention without trial. Symbolically, the arrest of the popular musician Fela Kuti personified the crackdown by Buhari. Fela's lyrics sharply mocked the government's inability to deal with national problems. Buhari's regime's inflexibility caused public discontent, and its measures to crack down on civil liberties opened the way to another coup d'etat. In the early hours of August 27, 1985, the voice of Major General Joshua Dogonyaro, accompanied by martial music, told the bruised and battered nation that power had been seized in a bloodless palace coup from General Muhammadu Buhari by Major General Ibrahim Babangida. Later, in an address on Nigerian television, Babangida said the Buhari government had been too rigid and uncompromising, had failed to end economic mismanagement, and had caused intolerable suffering. After his 1985 ousting, Muhammadu Buhari spent 40 months, double the amount of time he spent in power, in prison. He was eventually restored to power by coup leaders, and between 1995 and 1998, he served as the chairman of the Petroleum Trust Fund. Finally, on 20th March 2015, he defeated the incumbent president, Goodluck Jonathan, and was inaugurated into the nation's highest political office on 29 May 2015. His current term of office is coming to an end in May of 2023. Don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been Tatenda for African Biographics. Until next time, cheers. Have a good one.